Suicide is a tough topic, but the Washington County Reach for Hope Suicide Prevention Coalition wants you to know that there is always hope. We are a caring community reaching out to provide compassion and hope for a community free of suicide. In the next half hour, we'll talk with community partners to identify risk factors, raise awareness, and discuss prevention strategies.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on another edition of Reach for Hope. I'm Melissa Anderson. You know, when children are struggling with thoughts of suicide, it's especially tough on parents who don't often know where to turn. With us today to talk about suicide ideology from a parent's perspective is Kai Nordfelt, a parent of 5 and a small business owner. Welcome, Kai, and thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Melissa.
Now, Kai, first of all, tell us what you do.
Yeah, so right now I basically own an online business, and my wife and I, we both have online businesses and work from home. And like you said, we have 5 kids and live here in St. George, and it's a great place to raise kids. So.
Yeah, it certainly is. Now, you previously to doing your online business were the chair for the Washington County Youth Prevention Coalition, and you played a major role for years helping kids and youth and teens to understand the damages and harms of drugs and alcohol. Tell me why you were so invested in that.
Yeah, early on when I was trying to figure out my career, I remember spending some time in the prison. I did some volunteer work there, and I met with a lot of people and just kind of more listened to their stories. I wasn't a therapist or anything, but as I listened to their stories, you know, the common thing that kept coming up was drugs. You know, drugs got them. They were under the influence when they hurt somebody or hurt themselves or robbed a store or whatnot. And I thought, man, is there some way we could get ahead of this? Is there a way to prevent this from happening? And then I kind of centered it on drugs, because if we can prevent a child, you know, a teenager from using drugs, you can prevent, you know, so many other problems that come later or, you know, as it goes on through life. So there's a lot of great science that shows how to do that. A lot of it's just really trying to help change the environment or make it easier for parents to raise drug-free kids. So, for example, a lot of what we look at is more like policies. So we look at making it as least accessible as possible. So, for example, the most commonly abused drugs are marijuana, nicotine, and alcohol. And so particularly on nicotine and alcohol, you basically try to restrict it. You put, you know, that's why we have liquor stores. I know some people don't like Utah's alcohol laws, but actually there's a lot of great science that shows if your goal is to prevent underage drinking, the laws that Utah has in place are excellent to do that, while still giving adults reasonable access to drink. And so, you know, when and again on like nicotine, like on vaping or cigarettes, you basically try to make it as expensive and also restrict it to certain stores. So, for example, in Utah, you know, only certain products can be sold in smoke shops instead of actually, if you go back a couple of years ago, you could buy them at any store, any convenience store, you know, or gas station or grocery store. So we just try to make it easier on kids to make the healthy choice by making it less accessible. It's as easy as, you know, thinking about, you know, I really love sugar. So, you know, if I'm going to have a cake out in my house all the time with a chocolate cake, like I'm going to eat it, like I'm going to consume it. So I've got to restrict it for myself unless, you know, if I want to make healthier choices. Same principle is true with kids. Just make it harder for them to get access to it, and you'll see fewer of them using drugs.
Yeah, and sugar is actually an addiction too. So,
Sure.
You know, that's anything. I think you can become addicted to almost anything,
Probably
video
can.
games, anything these days. So when I was thinking about that, which came first though, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to sometimes kids are fine and then they start using drugs or alcohol after something changes in their lives. And that's what I want to talk about here is that, you know, kids these days have a lot of peer pressure. They have social media. They want to be like that person on the TikTok or whatever that does this or that, or they don't feel like they fit in. And so therefore they turn to the drugs and alcohol. I think education is key to that. Tell me how, as a parent with 5 children, how you've managed to try to get a handle on that, knowing all that you know.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, you know, to be, you know, fully disclosed. I mean, I worked in drug prevention my whole career up to this point, you know, 13, 14 years, and still, you know, my oldest child ended up using substances. So in my home, basically we apply, you know, some of the best practices or what the science shows will help. So, you know, constantly we're talking to our kids about the harms of drugs. You know, we taught them, we had them heavily involved in our church that we're part of, which is also shown as a protective factor. We had them, involved in dance and sports and other things that show, if you get kids more involved in pro-social activities that recognize the good they're doing, that they're less likely to use drugs. But even with all that effort, my poor daughter fell victim to it, when you think about it, these companies that sell it, whether it's e-cigarettes or alcohol, they spend billions of dollars trying to target particularly people who are vulnerable. And my daughter is vulnerable. One of the things you asked about education, I think every parent should, understand their family history, the genes, the genetics that they have. That's really important. And that's something that we didn't fully appreciate, I don't think. But, rich in our family history is, the seeds of addiction were, not with me necessarily, but, from birth parents that passed it along. Also, I think even more profound in this case was for my poor daughter is the depression and anxiety. Both sides, from my wife's side and my side, there was rich history of this, and I didn't fully appreciate it. As a young father raising my children, the impact that would have. So my poor daughter, really from early on showed. It's hard for me to identify it at the beginning. My wife was more sensitive to it, but just these signs of depression, of feeling sad inside, feeling, we're talking like early teens, 10, 11, 12, 13, just feeling sadness, and trying to figure out why, not sure why. And also I think kind of just struggling to connect with people, whether she was just a little bit, she would, move between friends or, particularly in her teenage years, which was concerning. But anyway, the point there is being able to understand, what happened to our parents and our grandparents and what genes were passed down. The studies are really clear that can increase the likelihood that, and it doesn't mean that they're going to, but it just makes them more at risk. It makes it more at risk if they experiment with drugs or they go untreated with their anxiety or depression, that it could really spiral out of control quickly.
Yeah, and mental health is something that we don't often think about until it's too late.
Yeah.
We're like, what's wrong with them, or what's wrong with you? You're not listening to me. What's the matter with you? But like you said, they might not even know what's the matter with them because they don't really have a handle on it, and that can be passed down through the DNA. And we need to be aware of that, like you said, as well as drugs and alcohol addictions. So what warning signs then did you see or get from your daughter as far as what you were dealing with her? Did she start having suicidal thoughts?
It's a great question. First, I have to kind of give a background. I mean, she was a straight A student, so she was great at school. She held down 2 jobs at one point, and this is like in her probably when she really started experiencing suicide ideation was more towards like her junior and senior year in high school. At least that's when it really started manifesting itself. But some of the warning signs were, and thinking back, and I was just chatting with her about this because thankfully we were able to catch it. And, she's still alive today, which is so awesome because she's such a great person, so great to have in our lives. Is, like every parent, the pressure for her to get a phone and then, to get social media is strong. So we resisted it for years, just like, no. And I was just looking up the research today. And again, there's a real strong connection between social media and screen time, how much time a person or a child spends on their phone, playing video games or watching TV. You can add any of those in there. But particularly social media seems to have this negative impact on the sense of their value, can impact how they view themselves and think about themselves. And so we resisted it for a couple of years, but I think it was about age 14 is when we finally gave in to her. My wife was just telling me today that it was a counselor at school that said, maybe that's a battle you shouldn't fight. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure what the best answer is. I don't know that I have all the right answers, but talking to my daughter recently, she just mentioned she thought maybe that was a little early for her. So anyway, what we found over time is we found her more and more, some of the warning signs, more and more on her phone, trying to pull her off of it, trying to, help her get involved in some of the other activities that she normally did and enjoyed, finding her kind of withdrawing from us, Obviously the more in tune you are with your child, and I can't say that I completely was, but my wife was better than I in that. But when she would withdraw herself from us, she wouldn't spend as little, particularly as she got into her 15 and 16-year-old, less time at our house, not wanting to spend much time with us. And and obviously
that's almost a typical teenager.
Exactly. So they can be challenging. It can be challenging to identify.
Right.
And then some of the other warning signs were just different friends. She would come home with friends, but she seemed to struggle to connect deeply with friends. So one week would be one group, or 1 month, and the next month would be another group. And the scary thing about that as a parent is you don't know what group is she going to end up in and what kind of influences, because we know that friends make a big impact on what kids do. So those are a couple warning signs. She began to express to us these feelings of depression, early on, 12, 13. So we got her access to a therapist. A lot of times she didn't like it and she didn't really want to take it serious. As she got older into her 15 and 16-year-old, we were able to help her get access to medication that can help with depression, because she just felt such a sadness, that she couldn't she's a great person. It wasn't like it was an unusual sadness. There's no reason other than biological that her brain just wasn't producing dopamine or serotonin or something like it should. But she didn't really want to take, the medicines as prescribed. So it just added to her depression, her sadness.
Yeah, and sometimes they do, and they even have warnings on the bottles and the labels about that. It's really a tough situation as a parent to try to figure out what to do at that point. So what did you do then after that to try to reach out for help? Where did you go after that?
So it kind of came to a head in between her junior and senior year. I was out working on my car, and I got this call from her, and she was frantic about, telling me to come right now. And that she was in trouble, and that, she needed help. And so I ran out, I got my car and drove her to where she was, and she was with a cop. And we didn't know at the time, but she'd started vaping, and again, it's tough for me this was my profession, I'm supposed to be able to prevent people in the community from doing it. I should be able to prevent my own daughter, right? And she had gotten some and then also shared some with her friend, and her friend had an allergic reaction to it and stopped breathing. So it was really traumatic for her and traumatic, obviously, for her friend. Thankfully, her friend, ended up being fine. But at that point, we realized that we needed to do something more than what we were currently doing. I didn't really know all the answers at the time. A couple resources that we did reach out to was the Southwest Behavioral Health. Reached out to people that we know there, asked for different ideas and suggestions. We had a therapist that she was already meeting with, so we chatted with therapists to get ideas. We also ended up going on to it's called drugfree.org. Drugfree.org. It's a partnership. The actual website is called Partnership to End Addiction. The way that what had happened was, because of her use of drugs, she ended up feeling so guilty and crap about herself when she came off the drugs that she just wanted to end her life. That's how kind of the suicide part came into it.
That's when they come down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she just was sick of it, sick of living, and didn't want to live anymore. But anyway, at the drugfree.org, when you go on there, there's actually a parent hotline. You can call it, and parents who are trained to help and assist can give you some ideas and suggestions in terms of how to interact. These are parents that have been in your same shoes and can provide some guidance and help to kind of think through this crisis situation.
So how is she doing now, and how old is she?
She's doing good right now. I just had lunch with her yesterday. Right now she's almost 20. It's great to have her. Is it perfect? It's not. It's still a challenge. But we continue to work with her and connect with her, and we keep her in our lives and show her that we love her and just try to support her the best that we can, where she'll let us, and 'cause she's an adult. So
yeah.
She seems to be in a good place right now.
Well, I think the most important message here is that you never gave up.
Yeah.
And as a parent and as loving parents, you never gave up.
Mm-hmm.
You just said, what are we going to do now? What's the next? And you never gave up.
Yeah.
And because she saw that in you, I think that support system right there, that it saved her life.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, and we did have, the other thing is, and you promote this all the time, and I appreciate that, is the QPR training: question, persuade, and then
Refer.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we applied that numerous times with her. We would be direct, and I didn't know that I should be that direct with her in terms of asking her, is she thinking about suicide? At the time I didn't know what to say, but after getting that training and understanding it, that helped me out a lot. So that's another training that parents should definitely get, is that QPR training, to know to be direct and ask them about it and then refer them. So, we've referred to a variety of resources. In the end, we actually sent her off to, because her substance abuse got so intense, we ended up sending her out to a wilderness therapy where she lived out in the mountains for about 40 days. It was right during the winter, about this exact time.
Oh, burr.
And it was freezing and stuff, but that was really helpful to get her clean and help get her more clear-minded.
Yeah, and those can work for people. I mean, they really have proven to be successful.
It saved her life. It's more of a acute intervention. Basically you're just trying to help them, shock them into getting clean, and that's what she did, which was great. And we got our daughter back for a while. When she came back, she did relapse, but you just kind of work with her.
And that's the thing. She could relapse again,
right,
if she doesn't keep that power of positive thinking and use some of the tools and resources that they probably gave her during that time. When she was in there. So, I think I'm hearing that it's important not to feel like you're alone in this.
Right.
There's probably other parents that have dealt with similar things. Was there anything else that you did as a parent to reach out to maybe support groups or anything out there that had similar issues?
Yeah. My wife on social media, she began to kind of share part of her journey, with the experience with our daughter, and it was amazing, how many came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, we have the same thing with our daughter." And my wife has had a ton of opportunities to kind of help coach and help some of her friends along. But at the time, it was nice to have friends that we knew, were experiencing, so we knew we weren't alone. But it was a very difficult time for my wife and I during that time. Very dark at times, really, kind of in crisis mode. The last time before we sent her off to wilderness, thankfully, QPR training is done in the schools and among teenagers, and teenagers know about it. And so one of her friends that my wife didn't even know, somehow she got my wife's number, and texted her and said, "Hey, you got to find Caitlin. She's in trouble right now." And so we couldn't find her for about 30 or 40 minutes, but we finally located her. And coach, my wife, she didn't want to come home, but coached her into coming home, and at that point, we knew we needed to do a more aggressive, intervention. At the time, we'd only been doing therapy, like outpatient therapy, but that's where we got her into full residential. And she told us that she was planning on, right before my wife connected with her, she was planning on just running onto I-15, and ending it that way. And so we're grateful for that. Her friend that had the courage to contact my wife and tip her that this was going on. So these trainings in the schools are really important for these teens to know what to do, how to recognize it, and to, intervene, because that girl saved my daughter's life.
And they have hope squads in there, and there's counselors and stuff, but a lot of times they don't want to talk to strangers.
Yeah.
They might want to talk to a friend, and that's probably how this friend got it from her. Thank God that friend did reach out. We're here talking about Reach for Hope. You're a member of Reach for Hope Suicide Prevention Coalition. Why did you join?
Really, this issue, it touches, our lives. And if there's something that we can do and help, we want to do it, So it's great to be able to work with you as the chair and other great people that are on the coalition to support these important events. So glad to be part of it.
Yeah, and we are working on training sessions for people to learn that QPR, to know how to use our words, and to be more positive and connect and be a source of resources for the community. That's what it's all about. We've shared the Live On campaign and all of these great resources that are out there. It's just you got to catch it in time. Yeah. And I'm so thankful to hear your success story there. At what point do you think that we realize as parents that we can't place blame on ourselves? I'm sure that was going through you and your wife's heads, and that mental health is just as important as going in for a physical.
Yeah. That's not an easy one. It took me some serious, thought and therapy to kind of work through and to see kind of what my role was. I think that was one of the helpful things about the residential treatment that she got was we were able to, probably the most helpful thing, and I think, as I look back, this might be helpful for some parent, is the therapist that we had early on, like it wasn't a marriage and family therapist. So she would go into a room, talk to the therapist. We had no idea what she was saying, and basically, probably talk about how she wasn't too fond of us, So she came out of it, and there was no real connection or solution to try to solve what the differences in our relationship. But when we were in the residential, this outdoor outdoor therapy, we were assigned a therapist that our daughter had as well. So she would go in, and this therapist would go in and talk to my daughter and tell my daughter, look, there's certain things I'm gonna share with your parents, because we want to heal this relationship. At this point, our relationship was really bad. It was rough. And so she would go in, get the key, not share everything, but with us, but come back and tell us, hey, this is what is causing a bit of a divide between you and her, and how you could, work a little bit more closely with her and help her. And so we would take that and be, okay, good. I didn't understand exactly what she was experiencing. So it brought us together as a family, instead of having her off with a therapist, or us off with our therapist, and there's no resolution, no connection to it. So I think that relates kind of what you're saying. Those are some tools to help, improve mental health, recognizing it. But I do think a family approach, it's important. Sometimes I think it was kind of a waste of money to pay the therapist that she just kind of went in and complained to, because we never really got, over time we realized we had a part that we played. We caused some of, or we didn't help improve some of her, some of the depression or anxiety, her feelings.
Yeah.
We had a part of it, not everything, but
you have to recognize that. And the other thing is, though, that not everybody's going to have the same reaction. And I think parents react instead of be proactive, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's our job as parents, is to say, okay, why'd you do this, or what's going on, and why can't you do that? And instead of saying, how can we help you? And we're not understanding, and maybe being more open-minded with not being the role of a parent at that point, but more of a friend, and saying, we love you, and we want to help and support you. What advice then, we've got a few minutes left, do you have for parents out there that might be having similar issues?
Yeah, I think, I think the advice I would give would be, again, the marriage family therapist, find a way to unite your child with you, have them work in the same direction. Don't work in opposite directions with a different therapist. I think that was super helpful, and to heal our relationship. Never give up on them. Always stay, it can be exhausting. And sometimes I had to take a time out. Like there was times where I couldn't handle the constant, because we would drug test her, and the constant disappointment, she would fail the drug test, or she would do things behind our backs that, wasn't part of what we taught her, So sometimes you have to take a time out. I had to take a time out. There was times when my wife just had to take over, There was times I took over for her. So we kind of, tag teamed it. Thankfully, our marriage survived that, because there are some marriages that don't survive it. We were able to do it unitedly. So that was good. But yeah, stay close to them, love them. Don't give up on them. Seek the best professional help you can find and can afford. I think Southwest Behavioral Health is probably the best affordable one in terms of, because it doesn't cost as much. And just persevere, just, keep moving forward. A lot of it for us is our faith in God and our belief that, that He's there to help us too. So that faith, I think, is a really important aspect of it, or can help out as well.
Yeah. And that's what hope is faith, right? I mean, it's really tough to say, oh, okay, well, if you didn't have that faith, what would you be turning to? And maybe sometimes during those addictions and those problems or whatever the children are having, that they don't have faith at that point. They've lost it somewhere. They don't have hope.
Yeah.
So a good reminder is to inject some of that back in there and say, hey, things aren't that bad. They're going to get better tomorrow. We all slip up in life. We all make mistakes, but guess what? Tomorrow's another day, and you work on that goal tomorrow. And the way I look at it is nothing is as bad as it really seems at the moment.
True.
And so to take those tools that they teach you and say, okay, I'm going to think about this a little bit and then figure it out tomorrow. And if we can be forgiving and think about those things, I think it works out better. So I'd just like to thank you so much for sharing, and
Absolutely.
so that other
Thank
families
you.
can get through this, and hopefully your life's experiences will help other families figure out where they should go in the future. And I'm so glad to hear that your daughter's doing better. And let's just keep our faith and our hope out there. And if anybody out there has, any wants to take this training, Reach for Hope has QPR training, and so you just look for that. So thanks for joining us, and remember, there is always hope. Thanks.
The Reach for Hope Coalition wants you to know that we care about you and we are here to help. If you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, reach out. You're not alone. To access resources for yourself or others, visit our webpage at reachforhopeutah.org. That's hopeutah.org. If you are experiencing a crisis,
Please call or text the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988.
because you matter and there is always hope.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.